Shutdown. What's up? Now, live from New York, Neil Cavuto.
Welcome back, everybody. Well, we just got a word out of the House that they did go ahead and improve that measure that would pay furloughed federal government workers. It goes on to the Senate right now. Here's other developments. The president is defending his health care law in an interview with the Associated Press, telling Americans not to give up on signing up to those new exchanges despite huge and major glitches in the system, some that are delays for hours. Some barricades are coming down in Wisconsin. Governor Scott Walker defying a government order to shut down several state parks that receive some federal funding. And Treasury Secretary Jack Lew is expected to make the rounds of the Sunday talk shows. He follows a warning by the Treasury Secretary that we could plunge into a downturn worse than the Great Recession if Congress lets the U.S. default on its debt. Reaction from Treasury Secretary John Snow minutes away. Republican governors outside D.C. are, though, blasting this dysfunction inside D.C. right now. Michigan Governor Rick Snyder, one of them. Governor, good to have you.
It's good to be with you, Neil.
We are facing a shutdown, and obviously you face acrimony in your state when you do things that aren't popular, whether it be with unions or what have you. But you have to deal with that. You have to get budgets done. You have to get procedures done. Not in Washington. What do you make of this?
Well, it's a huge mess. It says there's a broken political culture in Washington. And this isn't just the last part of it. I mean, think about the sequester, then this, then the debt ceiling. All these issues, they're just not doing it the right way.
What's the right way? What's the right way?
Well, they shouldn't be fighting and yelling and holding press conferences 2 miles apart. If you have a problem, you sit down with people and work through it. You get in a room and hash through what the issues are and you solve them. And in Michigan, we've done a great job. We had shutdowns in 2007 and 2009. I came into office in 2011, and we solved the debt question, we solved balanced budget, we did tax reform, and it's happened in many other states, Neil. So the states are showing all these things can be done by people working together. They need to do the same thing in Washington because all of us lose with what's going on. There is no winner for what's going on today, and they just need to solve this by sitting in a room and talking through it.
All right. Well, that does not mean you don't still have your detractors and those who wanted to, heave your hiney out of office like they did with Scott Walker. Now, you survived that kind of a pressure, and obviously you worked through it. In Washington, it's not quite that easy, where each side really doesn't trust the other. Now, the latest offer from Democrats and from the president, this AP interview this morning, Governor, is I will go ahead and address these health care issues you have, but first give me a clean CR, continuing resolution, and I will. So it's a modern-day version, I guess, the Ronald Reagan trust but verify. Republicans say they don't trust. So there we stand. How would we break this logjam?
Well, again, I would step back a minute. I like to go to the family analogy. If we're essentially one big family in Michigan and this country, and isn't that how we should operate instead of a broken political culture? Because when you have a problem with a family member, you don't go farther away and yell and scream at them or go out and put out on the street and yell to everyone that you have a mess up in your family. You sit down and talk with people.
Well, you haven't been to my family then, Governor. You've not been to my family. But
yeah, but it's a lot of it
right.
is you shouldn't be doing this through press conferences, through news releases. It should be people talking to people face to face. That's the basic way we handle it in a family. You'd handle it in a business. Every other part of our life, that's how we'd handle this problem. We wouldn't do it through public mechanisms where we're just saying negative things about one another.
That's where we stand. So let me ask you this. The Tea Partiers, the extreme conservative Republicans, they're the one getting a heap of blame for this. I don't know if that's fair, but right now in the mainstream media, that's the way it is. And Senator Mike Lee got an earful. He wasn't talking too much about it with me a few minutes ago, but he got an earful from a lot of other Republicans that he was killing them and maybe killing the party's chances in 2014. What do you make of that? What do you make of this very vocal sect of the Republican Party?
Well, I'd say is all the activity going on now, there are going to be no winners. There's no way to win other than just simply solving the problem and moving ahead.
I know that, but will it hurt the party's chances in 2014? Many argue it will.
Well, again, it's going to have negative impact on everyone in 2014 in terms of the public's perception of the public sector. in terms of how government operates. The impression of government is going downhill every single day this goes on, and most likely should, because this is not acceptable behavior. I mean, we're talking about real people here. In Michigan, I had to furlough, or they should call it laying them off, 900 people, good people, that should be working today, and we're going to have programs for the needy that are going to be starting to run out of money in the next 2 or 3 weeks. The interesting part is they can't even shut down the federal government appropriately.
Yeah. Governor, that's well put. Thank you very, very much, Governor Rick Snyder.
Great to be with you.
For as reckless as a government shutdown is, an economic shutdown that comes with default, with America not paying its bills, would be dramatically worse.
We can't have any kind of meaningful negotiations under the cloud of potential default, the first in U.S. history.
With Republicans who are willing to default on paying Americans' debt.
Threats and willingness to default.
They would push the button, throw America into default for the first time in history, and risk throwing us back into a recession.
All right, I do have to make something very clear here, folks. If we go past this debt ceiling thing and we don't raise it right away and we're supposedly on borrowed time, that does not mean we default. Tax revenues still come in. No one has told you stop paying taxes. You still pay taxes, but that drop-dead deadline date of October 17th remains. That's the date at which we're told the government runs out of money, and then when we run out of money, we can't pay our bills, we can't pay our bondholders, we default, then we're in a big heap of doo-doo. We've got Ronald Reagan's budget guy here, David Stockman, who says that's total nonsense. But it does scare people, Dave. It really scares people.
It certainly does. But the president is playing the role of calamity howler, saying that we're going to default, that there's Armageddon on the other side. And the irony is he's the only one that can cause a default.
Explain.
By not prioritizing the revenue when it comes in after he runs out of debt ceiling. We have $250 billion a month of revenue coming in, even in this kind of weak economy. The interest payment per month, by contrast, is $30 billion. He has the power to prioritize, allocate the first dollar to pay the interest. There's never should be a question that it won't be paid, and then move on and put it into Social Security or wherever else he needs to while they're negotiating a real solution to the fiscal problem.
So the only thing that would make you default, Dave, is if you don't make good on those interest payments.
If he doesn't
What if you don't make good on a Social Security payment?
Well, if you don't make good on a Social Security payment, there are going to be 55 million people not very happy about that.
But that's not a default.
But that is not a default. The kind of default they're talking about that ricochets through the global financial system is a default on the little bit of $30 billion of interest, not on all the other government payments.
But it's a scare tactic, and it's meant really to alarm the other side, get them to the table, alarm folks so it gets them to the table.
Well,
but it's overdone, right?
Yeah, no, but it's really designed to intimidate the Republican opposition. It's designed to scare the country. It's a scary bedtime story so that they will basically fold up their tent, raise the debt ceiling, allow the entitlement machine, $2.5 trillion a year of spending, to continue to roll along.
So what should Republicans do?
Republicans should dig in. They're on the verge of finally exposing the great myth the big government party loves, and that is we have no choice but to raise the debt ceiling and borrow some more money. If they hold tough, they can force him to allocate. When he allocates, somebody isn't going to get paid. Maybe some defense contractors, maybe some grants that were supposed to go to a local government. That will create pain. That will create demands for a settlement of these big fiscal issues, and frankly, for delaying Obamacare for a year because it's not ready for prime time.
Now, you've
anyway.
Actually praised the Tea Party efforts to peg the two. In other words, even if it meant the leverage of potential government shutdown, not that you welcome the shutdown, but that they should hang tough. Now, now even fellow Republicans are targeting them and saying, you nuts have spoiled it for us.
Well, I think they're making a mistake. Again, they're being intimidated by the party line of the Beltway. And the fact is, we don't have a real shutdown going on. There's 3.5 million people on the federal payroll. 2.7 million of them are still reporting for work, 80%. All the big operations of governments continue, including processing Social Security checks, the Veterans Administration, and so forth. So the point is, it would be a terrible mistake for the Republicans to fold now, for Boehner to engage in one of his patented serial surrenders, okay?
Because you dealt with, in the Ronald Reagan days, days, and he and Tip O'Neill, and it's been sort of like, you know, rose-colored all these years later, that they, you know, struck this personal friendship and you know, settled big differences, the private, you know, White House quarters. But it wasn't all that lily white, was it?
No, there was really hardball conflict most of the time, but neither side said we refuse to negotiate. When we had a crisis on a CR, continuing resolution, or a debt ceiling, or the big you know, deficits that opened up, there was a lot of hardball negotiation. There was a lot of give and take,
there were shutdowns.
push and shove, and I went through 4 shutdowns myself when I was in
how long
OMB.
were those? How long were those?
Those were a few days. The idea that our society with $16 trillion of GDP can't get by for a few days when a tiny fraction of the government is actually shut down, all the entitlements are being paid, etc. And frankly, when we get to this so-called drop-dead date on the debt ceiling, everything will continue as well.
Yeah, I don't think that's a drop-dead date at all.
No, it isn't. No, the point is really needs to be emphasized. The president is the only one, and the president alone, who can force a default on the interest payment on the debt. He will be required to make that allocation. The dean of liberal professors, law school professors in the country, Lawrence Tribe, last week said, when all else fails, when you don't have the revenue, you've got to allocate, pay the debt, the interest first, and then do what you can with the remainder. Now, he happened to be Obama's professor. He called him the brightest student he ever had. So I think the president needs to call up his law professor, find out that he has the power to allocate, and then stop all of this posturing, stop all of this scaremongering, get down to business and negotiate with the Republicans on the fundamental problem of we need a budget. We need some control on these huge expenditures.
Dave, always good seeing my friend Dave Stockman. What I love about Dave is he gets both parties annoyed. They both start writing nasty emails. Fair and balanced critic. All right, well, get ready to hear more of it because the president's Treasury Secretary is set to make the rounds tomorrow, warning of a default, despite the fact that Mr. Stockman said, you know, you're creating a panic where there is none. A former Treasury Secretary under George Bush who says, you know, David Stockman's right after this.